It's game day here in Vancouver. Welcome to Canucks Conversation for Thursday, February 29th. I'm Irfaan Gaffar, joined alongside by Harman Dial. Canucks Conversation is brought to you by the all-new 2023 Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X is Toyota's brand new all-electric SUV that is designed to go the distance for you and your family. Now, the BZ4X is packed with Toyota's coolest tech, and it still has that trusty SUV feel you know and love. And even though it's electric, it's capable of effortlessly conquering any terrain, whether it's rain, snow, mud, or your friends' questionable post-game recaps. The BZ4X will get you through anything. We are coming to you from the iconic Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. Looking for your next meeting space? Contact the Wall Center for all your event needs at sales@wallcenter.com. Harm, a busy, interesting week it has been in Canucks land. All the talk about Elias Pettersson, the contract, the negotiation, what is happening. Frank Seravalli was on with us on Wednesday and then reported that they were talking about possibly an extension and it could be coming in the coming days. Here's what Frank Seravalli had to say today to further that.
Development, which I reported on Wednesday, is the Canucks and Pettersson's camp have made significant progress on what is believed to be an 8-year deal. I don't want to speculate on the total dollars just yet. I think it's fair to say certainly approaching $100 million total. But this is absolutely massive for the Canucks. Cannot say more as to what this means to this team, and to be able to get something like that done, if they can get it across the finish line in the next couple days, would give them potentially 6-7 days before the deadline to really lock in their numbers and have a great idea of what their cap picture looks like moving forward, that they could potentially even add someone with term when it comes to the deadline.
Well, that's the latest from Frank Seravalli. I do know that the Canucks and the Pettersson camp have been talking, which is a very good sign. The Canucks are hoping to get this done sooner than later, Harm, and they're hoping to keep the AAV under $12 million.
Which makes sense, right? If that's what Vancouver's trying to do, obviously Pettersson's camp is going to want to come above that. To me, the two comps that stand out for a negotiation like this on a long-term deal would be, I think your floor is obviously William Nylander at $11.5 million. Nylander, his career high is only 87 points, whereas Pettersson, he's on pace for a second 100-point campaign. Not to mention Pettersson plays a premium position as a centerman. That's, I think, your floor. And then your ceiling, of course, is McKinnon at 12.6. I think we can all agree that McKinnon's right up there as a top 3 player in the NHL. Don't think Pettersson's quite at his caliber. McKinnon, of course, has the Stanley Cup as well. We've seen how dominant a year he's having now. That's the range, I think, where we're all waiting to see where exactly does he slot. Is it a number with a high 11? Is it in the low 12 range? That's going to be interesting to see. But as much as we're talking about the cap hit, to me, what's more significant is the possibility that this could be a long-term extension in 8 years. Because Pettersson could have easily said, I want to give myself maximum flexibility for my future. I'm going to, let's say, sign a 3-year extension so that I'm expiring as a UFA the same year that Quinn Hughes is.
Yeah.
He could have just as easily done that. I mean, look at how Matthews has typically played his contracts. Even just now, signed a 4-year extension with the Leafs in the offseason. That's massive, getting the extra years of term if the Canucks are able to get that with this Pettersson extension. Because as we exit this flat cap, it's going to continue rising. And there might be some sticker shock for some people if there's a $12 million cap hit, for instance, attached to Pettersson's next deal. But keep in mind that star players, there's quite a few of them that are coming up soon who are going to continue just driving it higher. And that price isn't going to seem as high because you got Leon Draisaitl up at the end of next season.
Yeah, it's going to be massive.
Connor McDavid the year after that. Matthews, again, his cap hit on that 4-year extension is 13.25.
Yeah.
He's going to be the highest paid player in the NHL next season. So for as high as that number looks right now, the future years, especially as the cap continues to rise, that would be massive. I think the only situation where you'd go, ooh, that's way too high of a cap number is if we were discussing, let's say, north of 12 on a 3 or 4 year deal.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest thing is when you look at this is the fact that it is an 8-year deal. If what's being reported is true and he does end up signing an 8-year extension, Harm, but you look at it and you say the reported number, what Frank said, close to $100 million value. Now I have to ask you, and you look at it, and you look at some of these star players and the way that contracts and the prices have been drived up and the way that they will continue to be. Is Elias Pettersson worth $100 million?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He's 100% worth that range. I mean, it's rare to have a centerman in their prime who can put up back-to-back 100-point seasons. I mean, you just look at the numbers. I don't have the exact in front of me right now, but I've done it in the past where in previous seasons, just look at how many players have had 100-point seasons and then look at who can repeat it the next year. Because there are a lot of players who can put up 3 digits in a single season. Following it up is really difficult. And to be able to do it on top of being a pretty solid two-way player as Pettersson is, that's a rare player type. And I know he's not necessarily playing his best hockey right now, but let's not forget that he was their best player by a pretty considerable margin last year. We know how dominant he can be. We know he can take over games. And for as much as there are some corners of this market that are concerned with the idea of, oh, will this guy be a playoff performer? Let's not forget that. And I know the bubble playoffs were different, but Pettersson, Hughes, Miller, all these guys were productive in the first taste of playoff hockey they got. So I don't really buy that as a concern either. Again, on a long-term deal, I absolutely think he's worth that.
When you look at it from the Canucks point of view now, they're obviously happy it's hopefully going to be a long-term deal. That's obviously what they're trying to negotiate right now. But when you look at it and you say, okay, they're able to get this done with days before the deadline, how big is that for Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, and their group? If in fact it does get done.
That cost certainty definitely matters, because imagine that you're the Canucks and you're thinking about players that you might want to make outside of, let's say, depth moves, a bigger run at, whether it's another top 6 forward with some term or a rental that you may want to re-sign. You don't know if you can afford that player next season if you're looking at a scenario where we don't know what Pettersson is going to come in at. We don't know if he's going to re-sign here at all, and that means we're going to have to go out and allocate resources to another centerman. Because imagine there's an opportunity now to get a dream, let's say, forward or defenseman who maybe isn't even publicly being discussed as
isn't even on their, it was on their radar, but we don't know about it.
Exactly. The same way that last year, Philip Hronek wasn't on anybody's radar. No. They went out and acquired him. Imagine there's that type of opportunity that they love to make, and it's going to cost them assets. Well, if you don't know if you have a franchise center locked up next season, you might be thinking internally, well, can we trade these assets? What if we need to save these assets to go out and replenish our center depth if Pettersson doesn't re-sign in the summer? So I think the cost certainty is massive. Also, just from the perspective of now you don't have to be so all in and desperate this year, right? Because if there was uncertainty looming and you're staring at a scenario where you're going to lose a first-line caliber centerman, then you might go, wait, hold on. When you're moving a player of that caliber, you're going to get a lot of value back, but chances are you're going to lose that trade. You might be incentivized to, let's just load all in. This is the year. We got to make it count. Whereas,
but I still think that they want to.
Like, sure, but at least you're not desperate.
Yeah.
And you've already made your one big move in Lindholm, so you don't have to, is my point. Whereas if you thought there's a possibility that Pettersson could walk or not want to sign in the summer, then you may go, all right, we need to push all our chips into the middle.
In my opinion, I'm going to ask you what do you think changed? Because in January, Elias Pettersson, he didn't want to talk until the summer. Obviously, Frank saying that, there was a interview with Elliot Friedman last summer where he said that he was in no rush. And then now it's gotten to the point where just over a week away from the deadline, I think the Canucks and his camp were going to talk no matter what, just so you wanted to know from their perspective what his plan was. Now, things might have changed and he might have heard the noise a little bit and wanted to, start negotiating or talk to his agent about talking to the Canucks about maybe, getting something going or get the ball rolling a little bit. But from the Canucks point of view, I think that they were going to have a conversation with him during this week or at some point leading up to the deadline, no matter what.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the timing of when David Pastrnak, for example, he signed his 8-year extension. He's, of course, also rep by CAA. He signed his extension March 2nd of last year, so almost a year today, which, again, was just prior to the deadline. So it is one of those another timeline, another potential pressure point to try and get a deal done. And I even mentioned it in the offseason, the way that CAA played the Pastrnak negotiations, where Boston back in that summer really wanted to get a deal done. Pastrnak was in a wait-and-see mode, and Boston proved that, okay, we're still a winning team. Our window's still open. And in the meantime, Pastrnak had another huge year.
Yeah.
The price for his next contract went up, more favorable comparables. And I mean, Boston's now happy that they got their star player, their franchise player locked up long-term. And Pastrnak is obviously happy that he got his big 8-year extension. I wonder if this is a similar type of trajectory, similar type of playbook. And in terms of the willingness to get a deal done now, I mean, the biggest thing that's changed from the offseason from Pettersson and the Canucks perspective is that Vancouver is back at the top of the NHL standings.
Yeah.
They're looking like Stanley Cup contenders, and nobody saw that coming in the summer, which matters a lot for franchise players because they're not just thinking about dollars and cents. A lot of them are also thinking about legacy. They're thinking about, I want to win Stanley Cups, and that respect factor of you can be a player that is on a team that you rack up a lot of points, but Irf, as I'm sure you know, you don't get that same respect among your peers if you're putting up those numbers, but you're on a team that's not actually winning. And that sort of thing matters to star players. And it certainly does in Pettersson's case as well. He wants to be in a city he can win.
Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, those guys, they haven't won, right? You make it to the conference final, you haven't won a championship. So their names are in there with those types of players that, you know, you make all the money, but your team really hasn't had that much success or met much success at all. So there's the knock on that. But for Elias Pettersson, I think that, you know, he's a guy he's a different individual, right? And I think it's no secret. You've heard Frank talk about it all week. You've heard other reporters around the National Hockey League, as well as here in Vancouver, just talk about, you know, he's a little bit of a different dude. The way that he thinks, the way that he sees the game, the way that he talks to people, it's a little bit different. What do you make of him wanting to try and get this done now?
I do wonder if part of it is just the noise as well. Not that it's the entire reason, because as you mentioned, the deadline is a time for deals like this to get done, like Pastrnak last year. But if you're trying to win and you want to go on a deep playoff run, is it great having your name in rumors every single day of the week? Is that not a distraction? And I know the cliche is tune it out, try not to pay too much attention to social media, but it's really difficult to do that. And I think that has to be a factor. Rick Talk yesterday was mentioning that Elias Pettersson is only human, and that sort of thing must have at least some type of impact on him.
Well, especially in today, right? You can't go and watch, you know, TSN or Sports Center and not see your name come up. And this is going to be the richest contract in Vancouver Canucks history when it's all said and done. If it is in fact going to be an 8-year extension, you got to think that the Canucks are going to want to try and get this done sooner than later. I mean, tomorrow is an off day, scheduled practice day. They practice and fly on Saturday, then they're gone. So if by that you look at it and say the deadline for them to maybe get it done, and you have a press conference and you do all this, and you know you have Elias Pettersson be that cornerstone, that franchise player, and you trot him out and do all that, you might want to try and get it done by tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the timeline in terms of how quickly they can get this done. I'm just encouraged by, okay, these two sides are discussing, and it feels like there's significant progress, because there'd be nothing better than for these two sides to get this deal done, have it no longer be a talking point, and then everybody can just focus on this year's success and hopefully going deep in the playoffs.
Well, this year's success is obviously based on, we'll see what happens. But I think that the biggest thing right now is the collective fan base can look at this and say, okay, there was a lot of people that, you know, thought, and people were kind of quietly talking around league circles and saying that there's no chance Elias Pettersson was going to resign here in Vancouver. So I think if you're the fan base and you're the Vancouver Canucks, you look at this and say, okay, we're going to negotiate with our guy, and we're going to negotiate for a long-term extension. So that's obviously an interesting one to definitely keep into the back pockets if and when, in fact, this deal is done. But we're going to bring in one of our guests, and, you know, he's someone that played here in Vancouver. He's also played for the Anaheim Ducks, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Nashville Predators, Colorado Avalanche, Calgary Flames, and Florida Panthers, co-host of the Missing Curfew podcast. Your friend and mine, Mr. Shane O'Brien. Obes, how's it going?
Fellas, how we doing? Thanks for having me. Your setup looks good. Hopefully I sound good. I haven't broke the computer out in a while, so hopefully I sound nice and clear for you fellas.
You sound and look great. Shane, the talk around the league, and especially in these parts, have been about Elias Pettersson. If you are the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, how much are you paying Elias Pettersson?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably everything he wants, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you want to lock this guy down. To me, this year, right from the start of training camp, I don't know, there was a picture of him where he had kind of a beard and he was in his gitch and his shoulders looked bigger and he looked like he had a chest on him and he hadn't shaved for a bit. And I'm like, this guy, he's looking like he's turned into a man. And he was so young when he came over here that I think when these young players come over, we just expect them to already grow into their body and be mature. And anyways, he looks great. If I'm him though, and I've never been in a situation where I'm getting that big of a contract, you want to make a deal that works for the Canucks as well, right? They're heading in the right direction. They're way ahead of what everyone thought they would be. Yeah, you want to get your money, but also think big picture, and I hope he does that.
You obviously played here. From a player's perspective, how much of the media noise do the players here, especially now that we're in a social media age, how much of an impact do you think that has on players' performance and what they hear and their overall sort of presence and how they feel about playing the market?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I was talking to Updog this week about it. Like with social media now, it's like, it doesn't matter really where you play, right? We saw what happened with Patrick Laine in Columbus, where some guys were doing a podcast and it got online and he got wind of it and obviously wasn't happy about what was being said. So I think it's not like it used to be even when I played there, when X was just coming out and there wasn't Instagram yet. And I think there's media attention everywhere now. I don't think you can hide. Doesn't matter if you're playing in Columbus or Van City or Toronto. Now there is more, media guys in Edmonton and Vancouver, Toronto, Canadian cities. But listen, the media was always great with me. When you're winning in Vancouver, there's no better city in the world right now. I guarantee if you ask JT Miller, Pettersson, Besser, when they go out for dinner, when they're going to have a drink, life is unbelievable for those guys. So when you win in Van City, the media is great. When you don't play well, you're going to hear about it. And when you're making big bucks or any kind of money in the NHL, I think that comes with the territory.
When you look at this market and, they haven't had a home playoff game in quite some time, Shane. I mean, obviously you've played here and you know the way that the team operates and the way the city can galvanize behind the Vancouver Canucks. From a player's perspective, obviously looking at it, how much fun are these guys having and are about to have going into the playoffs?
Galvanize. Nice word, buddy.
I might
have to steal that one from you. Don't ask me how to spell that, by the way. But no, fella, it's the best time of year in Vancouver, man. My 2 years there, when it got to April, you boys know more than anything, right? It stops raining, the sun starts coming out. You can see Kitts Beach over there. It's nice. The Yellowtown's buzzing. Harbor Bay is starting to buzz a little bit. And then you see the flags on the cars around the city and people wearing Canucks jerseys and people leaving the office and throwing their Canucks jersey on. There's no better feeling. I mean, driving to the rink back in the day, it was GM Place back then, and seeing the Canucks fans out and knowing you got a home game that night on a Saturday or whatever night it is, it's so special. Listen, the barn's starting to rock again. I watch a lot of Canucks games. I don't miss many. My boy Tox is behind the bench. You boys know I love this city. It is so good to see what is going on right now, and it's only going to get better. And I'll be up there for a game, boys. I'm coming up. I don't know how I'm going to get tickets. Nobody I know there is anymore. Tox doesn't have enough tickets, he's already saying. So it's going to be unbelievable, and I can't wait to see those white towels buzzing.
JT Miller's having a monster season, but has been especially dominant since the All-Star break. He's 6th in the league for points right now. Do you think he's one of the more underrated stars in the NHL right now?
I do. And, I'm not a sensitive guy, but I would like some apologies from Vancouver when I was all over Bo Horvat and people were like, "Oh, you're fat, you idiot, you don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, listen, JT Miller, I knew from day one that this guy had that passion. And a lot of times when things weren't going well, when my boy Greener was there and then Boudreau came in, I get it. The way JT Miller looked at times, he looked like he could be maybe selfish or going over the line with his emotions, but you need guys like that. I'm not saying you need a whole team of JT Millers, but especially for that team in Vancouver, you need a guy that brings that energy. I mean, last game against Pittsburgh, boys, he was everywhere. I mean, on that PK, he was literally everywhere. Sid and the boys found a way to beat him, but I love JT Miller. I would take him on my team any day of the week. And when that game 1 starts of the quarterfinals, he's going to be even better. Mark my words. He's going to be buzzing.
Shane, when you look at this team, obviously they're first in the standings. They're leading their division by an absolute mile. What is one thing that you would want to see if they're able to do to be able to add? Is it one of those, is it a depth defenseman, or is it hopefully someone to add to your top 6 if you can make it work?
Yeah, I think every team, you boys know, you can never have enough depth on your back end come playoff time. I think if they can add a veteran guy, my biggest concern about the Vancouver Canucks, fellas, and I'm sitting here, with no Stanley Cup rings myself, is they don't have anybody in there that's been in the fight. And listen, when that puck drops in game 1 of the quarterfinals, it is different. You can only, it's hard to describe unless you play in a Stanley Cup playoff game. It's completely different. I loved it. I thought I was better in playoff games than regular season games. So if they can get some experience, my man, is what I'm saying. I think they need to get some guys that have won. I saw Phil the Thrill was skating in Abbotsford. I don't know what's going on with Phil.
Still is. All
right. I know. I've been in the fat club too, Phil. I know how you're feeling, buddy. Get the salads in you. But I just think they need some experience up front and on the back end.
Overall, you're obviously well connected around the league. Whether it's players, coaches, other sort of national media, what's the perception of Vancouver right now in terms of not just the regular season, because I think everybody can see the standings, but in terms of actually going into the playoffs? Do people view the Canucks as legit cup contenders?
It's a great question. You got to respect them because of where they are in the standings, right? I think if you went around the league, and this is just some guys I play with that are scouting, some guys that are, working for some teams now, experience and playoff, experience is one of the things that I think teams around the league look at Vancouver and say, hey, they don't have guys that have been there before, right? Pettersson, Hughes never played a playoff game. Thatcher Demko's never played a playoff game, stuff like that. But listen, Thatcher Demko, the way he's kicking right now, I mean, he's been unbelievable. I haven't loved Rick Talkin's such a smart guy, boys. And I've got to know Talk since I've retired, and he's such a beauty, but I haven't loved the way that they've played defensively lately after the All-Star break and has crept into their game. Like, they gave up 10 goals against the Minnesota Wild, and I love Billy G, and I love what they're building there, but you're not playing Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. To give up 10 to them, I think was reason for concern. I didn't love their game against Pitt. I think they got to tighten it up defensively, and if they do that, they're as good as anybody.
Shane, you're as good as anybody when you get to do this, and we can have you on the show. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of the run, and hopefully we'll see you when you make your return to Vancouver.
I'll hit you up if I come, buddy. But if anyone's got some tickets for playoffs, let me know.
All right, thanks. That's Shane O'Brien from Missing Curfew, co-host of the Missing Curfew podcast, and looking for tickets for Canucks playoff games when he gets down here. But yeah, I mean, obviously he made some interesting points. But before we get to that, it's time to talk about Park Casino, Harm. Park Casino is the official casino resort of the Vancouver Canucks, and Sekeres Price will be doing a live on location show inside BC Kitchen before the Canucks take on the Colorado Avalanche on March 13th. Come grab a bite, watch Sekeres Price, and take home some of the on-site prizes. On the days that Canucks play, you can receive 15% off the game day menu with your game ticket at BC Kitchen. Park is just steps away from Rogers Arena. When you sign up for Encore Rewards, you get a $10 free play to use in the Canucks gaming corner. Whether it's game day or just night out with friends, let it be at Park Casino, your place to play. One of the things I kind of wanted to get back to on what Shane said, it was the depth defenseman. I think that everyone, if you're looking at going into playoffs, as much as you want to add a top 6 forward, it's a depth defenseman. And especially when you look at the Canucks, that's probably a need that they're looking to fill here in the next week.
Yeah, I mean, think about when they went to 2011, how many injuries they ended up sustaining on the blue line. You had a young Chris Tanev having to play in the Stanley Cup final. And you look through some of the options that they have, and I think through your top 6 or 7, you feel pretty comfortable. But after that, I do think it's notable, for instance, how long it's been since Mark Friedman has consistently played. I know he played one game recently, but he had a long stretch where early it seemed like he was meshing with Ian Cole early in the year when he was first acquired. But then since then, Juleson it really seems like they favor him a lot more and trust him a lot more than they do Friedman. It seems like there's a pretty significant drop-off between him and that next year, whether it's Friedman, whether it's Jet Wu. Probably want to add another body, and that's the sort of thing that shouldn't be too expensive to acquire. I mean, to add a depth defenseman, somebody that you're not expecting this to necessarily play in your top four. It's going to cost you a mid-round pick.
Yeah. Having said that, the Canucks there's a game tonight. After everything that we've talked about, 25 minutes, 26 minutes into the show, getting Shane O'Brien, the Canucks play the LA Kings. The first of a few meetings with the LA Kings here down the stretch. A Kings team that obviously just lost Kempe, and he's going to be gone for what seems to be a while. You look at it now, and if you're the Vancouver Canucks, they mixed up their defensive pairings a little bit. You mentioned Noah Juulsen's name. What do you expect from him tonight playing with Quinn Hughes?
I hope that now that he doesn't have the puck moving burden on him, that he can just get back to what he's most comfortable with, which is defending, which is stepping up at the blue line in the right situations, boxing out around the net, killing plays defensively on the cycle. That's his bread and butter. That's where he has his most value as a defenseman. And I do think, look, anytime you go from playing on the third pair to now all of a sudden you're playing with Quinn Hughes, it makes life a lot easier. Now, as we discuss this game, bigger picture, I think this is an important game for the Canucks to sort of set the tone and tempo, because these teams are going to play each other a lot down the stretch, especially because this could be a potential first-round matchup. You end up playing the Kings if you finish tops in the Pacific Division, and the Kings are a wild card team. You also play LA next week, especially because now that they're banged up without Kempe, and I believe last game they didn't have Mikey Anderson on the top pair. It's not the full LA Kings that we're used to. Not to mention, they've been pretty inconsistent as of late. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games, but they won 4 straight before that. They're adjusting to a new coach. If you can just get in their head psychologically, and over these next couple of meetings that you're going to play them tonight and then next Tuesday, I believe, if you can really make a statement that we're legit, we're contenders, we're better than you, then I think that matters a lot, considering you could end up playing them in the playoffs.
Yeah, it could be a mini potential playoff series in the regular season before maybe meeting them in the playoffs. So 11 games it could be here against the LA Kings in the next little while. But Vancouver is playing LA tonight, Harm. We want to know who's going to score the first goal for Vancouver. And if you nail it, you could win a $25 gift card to the Four Winds Tap Room located at 72nd and River Road in Delta. Enter by following us on social media. Keep an eye out for today's show clip and comment who you think will light the lamp and score the first goal tonight. Winners will be contacted directly. Check us out at Canucks Army or at Canucks Convo on Twitter, at CanucksArmy.com on Instagram, and Canucks Army on Facebook. And make sure you ask about Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store, or have someone delivered to your front door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. Should be an exciting night tonight. I think if you're the Vancouver Canucks defense, a divisional matchup. Who do you got lighting the lamp?
I'm feeling Elias Pettersson. Good vibes with the progress reportedly on an extension. Good vibes. I'm rolling with PD.
Yeah. We're going to get to my bet way bet of the day at the end of the show, but I'm probably going to be trending towards that direction of Elias Pettersson. These two teams, when you look at them on paper, how do you view them matching up together?
So LA's biggest strength at this point is how well they defend, right? Yeah. They're the best PK in the NHL. They're one of the best teams in the NHL in terms of goals against, even though they haven't had, it's not like they have a marquee goaltender like Demko. And in that sense, they are trying to almost emulate the Vegas model, right? Where it's like, we defend so well as both a forward group and defensive unit that we're just going to make life easy for our goalies, and we're going to bank on Cam Talbot being our Aiden Hill. That's really the idea with the Kings there. But with Kempe out, man, they lack dynamic goal scoring, especially at the top of the lineup. They don't have the same level of star power that the Canucks do. That's where they have, I think, a pretty decisive advantage, where they don't really have an answer for Elias Pettersson. They don't really have an answer for a JT Miller. Or a Quinn Hughes, even to a lesser extent a Brock Boeser. The Kings don't have a player that's a point per game.
Yeah.
Think about that. With how much scoring has boomed, to not have a player that's on pace for an 80-point season, that tells you something. The big problem for them is Pierre-Luc Dubois has not been the player that they thought they were.
Well, I was just about to ask you about that. They paid a premium to get PLD and then paid him a lot of money to stay an LA King. What have you made of his kind of transition towards the Kings and now with them?
It's been a flop. As Quads would say he's a fraud completely. But I mean, the whole idea from LA's perspective was, okay, they have a deep forward group in the sense that they're pretty balanced throughout the lineup. And when you're moving, let's say Iafallo, Kupari, and Velarde, the idea was, okay, can you trade 3 decent players, especially in the case of Iafallo and Velarde? Can you sort of exchange 3 decent players for one like true difference maker, one player that can really make a huge difference in a playoff series? Dubois has not been close to being a top line caliber producer. He's pointless in his last 4 games. And until he gets going, it's a problem that they're going to have to deal with. Now, one player that I'm really curious to watch tonight from the Kings perspective, and this matters not just for this season, but beyond this year, is Quinton Byfield.
Yeah.
Because
Beast.
I watched him last year, and that's when he was first starting to play on the wing of that top line with Kopitar. And even though he wasn't producing a lot last season, I remember watching him in that Canucks game and going, boy, he's improved a lot. The speed, how he was handling the puck, his creativity off the rush. And he's broken out this year. He's got 44 points in 56 games. And the biggest thing here is still only 21 years old. So there's considerable upside there. And as we have this discussion that, okay, LA lacks stars, well, Byfield is probably their best bet at developing a star, maybe not this season, but maybe a playoff breakout, or whether it's over the next couple of years. I'm curious to see how much progress Byfield's made and how dangerous he looks against the Canucks, because right now I look at the top of Vancouver's lineup, and for as stingy as LA is defensively, and they probably have an edge in a lot of defensive metrics, the Canucks offensive firepower is just something that LA can't match right now.
Yeah. I mean, the Kings of Fiala's been having a good year. Canucks get Cam Talbot tonight to go up against Thatcher Demko. Night 2, I guess, of the balanced power play units. How quickly before, I know they scored last game, how quickly before do you think Rick Tocchet decides to change and load up again?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, considering they scored, probably going to give it at least a couple of games. This is going to be a tough test because LA's PK is
lethal,
elite. So I am like going back to that Pittsburgh game. I felt like the Miller power play unit had some looks even outside of the Besser bumper power play goal they scored. But the Pettersson unit seemed like they were struggling to just look dangerous, right? Not even in terms of finding the back of the net, but I didn't love the way they were necessarily moving the puck around the zone. And of course, part of it is, okay, you're making huge changes. You're introducing new players. Archie Bains was on that unit. Does it take you a while to gel? Does it take you a while to read off of each other's tendencies to understand what types of plays you're looking for? Probably. Now they've also had some practice time this week. That's something that, as we discussed, this power play struggle since the All-Star break, they barely had any practice time.
Yeah.
And I think from a coaching staff's perspective, they're really going to value not just being able to show, okay, in power play meetings on video, this is what we're doing wrong and this is what we want to do. But now that they've had some morning skates, now that they've had some practices, you're hoping that can maybe help them implement the changes that they're looking to make.
Yeah, obviously getting that time to work with the Twins and Rick Tocchet and them being on the ice to be able to do all that. You hope that you're able to maybe see some differences, or at least the 2 different power play units be aligned. Time for one of our favorite segments here, where you get to read you get to do the ad read for.
Yeah, I get to butcher it.
Yeah.
It's Time for Anyone Else, presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. And it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. With Double Dash and DoorDash, you can order from multiple restaurants or stores in the same delivery without additional delivery fees, so everyone can get what they want and need.
Someone tweeted me. It's actually pretty funny. Just curious why the assumption is that PD is worth $4 million more than JT Miller.
It's just how contract comparables work. I get it, right?
Yeah.
If you're not too well versed into contract comparables, the economics of how players are paid, it's easy to just, if you're somebody that just watches the games, to go, well, JT Miller's been their best forward this year. He makes $8 million. Why does Pettersson get $4 million more than that potentially? Yeah. I get it, but that's not how this works. PD's signing through his prime years. He's got a different set of comparables. When Miller signed, his closest comparable was probably in and around the range of maybe Mika Zibanejad, who was around 8.5. Or certainly he would have been, Miller's statistical case was at a premium relative to Hurdle, but the age makes a difference. The statistical comparables are really what drive these negotiations. And Pettersson's going to be worth $12 million if that's what he signs for on a long-term deal.
Yeah, and I think all signs are pointing in that direction. So we'll just have to wait and see. And we know that the two sides have been talking. And again, it's just a wait and see until they get it done and Pettersson signs on the dotted line. A few questions here coming into us. Marcus says, over under Lecker-Mackey making the team next year with all these big contracts. They got to fill out the team with some entry levels, you would think.
Yeah, this is a moving target because if you asked me this question, let's say 3 or 4 months ago, I would have thought that there's almost no chance Lecker-Mackey makes the team out of camp just because he's going to have the adjustment of North American ice. He probably needs to put some weight on. And with the way Rick Tocchet wants the Canucks to play this up-tempo forechecking style, there's a steep learning curve when it comes to those details. We've certainly seen that with Nils Höglander, for example, how not just on Tocchet necessarily, but it took him time to earn the trust of, first he was in Boudreau's doghouse, and then spending some time in the AHL last season was huge for him taking a step this year. But Lecker-Mackey is developing at such a quick pace at this point. I mean, we saw the lacrosse goal that
we have
was
going
viral.
Yeah.
Courtesy Dave Hall. He's developing so quickly that you can't rule it out. I mean, I still think it's more likely that he starts next season in Abbotsford, but could it be a scenario where he does what Höglander did in 2021, the shortened 56 game season, where he breaks into camp as a surprise and as a long shot makes it, if he has a dominant camp in preseason, gets a look? I don't think it's out of the world. I don't think it's an insane hypothetical, but I also think making the team next year, even with some of the players that the Canucks could lose because of cap reasons, it's going to be much harder than Höglander's situation, because Höglander that year, all he had to do was beat out Louis Eriksson and Jake Virtanen for top 6.
Yeah, it wasn't that hard.
Think about how different the roster is going to be next season. And if you're Rick Tocchet, the expectations are different. You're not in a development mode as a team. You're in where contending for a Stanley Cup. Do you have time for the inevitable growing pains for a rookie who'd be figuring the NHL out? So I still lean towards him probably spending more time in Abbotsford than in Vancouver next season, but he's having such a remarkable year that I wouldn't be shocked if he somehow ends up playing NHL games next year.
Yeah, I mean, you just saw that goal. It was the confidence. And I think the quote after was, I was just testing it, glad it worked on the lacrosse goal. So pretty legit, pretty confident young kid. Obviously had a ridiculous World Juniors. We've already shown a highlight once this week, and we're showing it again here today of just his pure skill and I guess confidence as well. What unorthodox Canuck, this is from Jeremy Lee, in development should we not sleep on? Maybe not Lecker-Mackey, but maybe someone else.
Just quickly, guys, we want to make sure we credit Sport Live 2 Direct out of Sweden for that video there.
Perfect.
Thanks, Grady. One sec. I want to look at the list here to see who. I keep coming back to Elias Pettersson, the defenseman. I mean, that's the first name that pops into my mind. And as I was sort of looking through the prospect pipeline names, I still keep coming back to him. Maybe a Kudraytsev as well. He is a left shot defenseman that can play the right side as well. Had a pretty good year in the OHL last year. And when I've seen him just in Penticton or in the early parts of training camp, Kudraytsev has stood out in terms of his intelligence, puck moving. He's maybe an under the radar name that I like, but watching the other Elias Pettersson at World Juniors, for example, you can see between his size, his reach, the backwards mobility he has, the defensive prowess, that you can see the pathway there. Not that it's going to happen immediately. It will take some time for him to maybe be a depth defenseman one day down the road for your NHL team, which obviously isn't the highest ceiling, but considering he was a 3rd round pick, would be terrific value. And he has a little bit of that throwback style to him where he is going to be physical. He is going to be mean. He is going to get into people's faces. And so I like him when you look further down further past the top big three when you look at Lekaramaki, Willander, and actually, who's the other one? Would you consider Ratu in that? Ratu's probably not quite in
Ratu's
that
probably
tier,
not that too, yeah.
But the big two then,
Yeah.
after the big two of Willander and Lekaramaki, Pettersson stands out to me.
Yeah. You know what was the great part about this is that you did the anyone else. Adri, now I get to do the prospect roundup because we did it both. We combined them. So prospect roundup, a presentation of our friends at Four Winds Brewing, family owned and operated in Delta, home to the Four Winds Light Lager, crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer for everyone. A perfect beer before, after, or during the game. Ask for Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store. Try saying that 5 times fast. Or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. There's a couple more people that have been, flooding our inbox here wanting to talk about some stuff. Where do we think Noah Hannafin is heading, Harm?
First of all, before I sort of rack my brain, do you have any initial thoughts? I know you're often connected with this sort of stuff.
Noah Hannafin?
Yeah.
Well, in free agency, I think he might be going home to Boston.
Yeah.
I think that's if it gets there, I think he's going to go home to Boston. But before that, the Dallas Stars went and got their defenseman.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pay a premium for the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames did just come out today, the report is that they're keeping Markstrom. So Is Hannafin going to stay? Are they going to make a run for the playoffs here? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, with Hannafin, Tampa makes sense as a fit hockey-wise. And I know there's been a lot of buzz around the idea that he'd be open to potentially signing an extension for a team like Tampa Bay. But the problem I see with the Lightning are they're just short on assets. Like, they don't have a first round pick until 2026. So to me, especially if you're a team that's at the tail end of its window, Steven Stamkos, even though his point totals are great, just can't drive top 6 play the way he used to. Who knows if Sergachev is even going to be ready for the playoffs? If I was in Tampa's shoes, I don't know if I'd be prepared to give up the assets. Not to mention, you'd have to think about, can you even afford a long-term extension for him beyond the season? What other pieces would you have to move out, considering they already have such a shortage of quality depth pieces that can you dole out the cash for another player at the top of the lineup? I do go back to the Boston fit as one that makes sense, especially in free agency. They can easily let go of Matt Grzelcyk, and at that point, Hannafin, Lindholm as a 1-2 punch on the left side of your defense would look pretty nice.
Frank also reported today on the DFO rundown that Florida is another option. So, keying in on perhaps that Florida state tax with one of Tampa or Florida, but we always know that they're right up against the cap. We saw last year that they had to go a roster player short, but never really doubt NHL GM's ability to maneuver some money around to bring in a big fish target.
Yeah, Bill Zito, right? He's one move away from maybe being potentially back to the Stanley Cup final. They were there last year, so you definitely know that he's going to be aggressive. He's going to try and do something. Reports that Gensel might be a player that they're interested in as well. So
they also have a lot of expiring contracts, so they can make it, especially on the blue line. Forsling, who's been a stud for them on the top pair, is a UFA. I believe Brandon Montour is a UFA. So they've got some pieces that they could let one of those guys go and afford to re-sign Noah Hannafin if they wanted to. They've got roster spots and money to play with when it comes to structuring their blue line beyond the season.
Yeah, and I think that they're a team as well. Like, you look at it and say, are they, when they really do go down and get to the nitty gritty here, are they going to be able to afford a guy like Sam Reinhart? Like, he's going to get paid again.
Yeah.
Like, all he does is score. All he's ever done is score in the National Hockey League. So he's a guy that's going to obviously go get his bag. Speaking of players getting their money, he's definitely one as well. Another question here. In terms of value, would you rather have Miller at his contract or PLD at 50%? And in brackets, we have to say this in brackets, major Miller supporter here. Miller all day. No?
Yeah, I think
it's not even a question.
Well, think of how much of a step back you'd take this season in terms of your cup contention odds.
Yeah.
Even though PLD at 50% retained would be a hell of a contract, but just looking up his production this year, 26 points in 58 games.
Yeah.
Like, that is rough. And
he's spent a lot of time in that fourth line too.
I'm sure he'll bounce back at some point, but also from like a culture standpoint, I don't know what you've potentially heard, but just talking to other teams, they don't hold PLD's work ethic in particularly high regard.
Well, there's a reason he's been on a few teams already.
Yeah.
And I think that when you see that around the National Hockey League, that was a knock on, not even gonna lie, that was a knock on JT Miller, right? He's been on a few teams now, and there was something there. Obviously, he's admitted to it early in his career. He struggled with being a professional, things like that. And the unfortunate part is that goes with you for a long time. I think JT Miller obviously has since, been able to rebuild his reputation in the National Hockey League and become a star in this league and obviously an all-star. But for PLD, that's going to go with you. And now you have this massive contract that's going to hold over your head forever.
Well, here's the thing. Before this season, I at least had some level of leeway for him because I'm thinking to myself, okay, Columbus, that's not the best place to necessarily play, and neither is Winnipeg. It's your right as an RFA to say, hey, I don't want to sign a long-term deal in Winnipeg, but now you got the destination you wanted in sunny LA. He was raving about how beautiful it is in Los Angeles, in California. He's got everything he's wanted in terms of lifestyle. He's got everything he's wanted in terms of his contract. Well, then where are the results? Where's not even just the point production? Where's for not putting up the numbers, at least are you noticeable on a night-to-night basis? And that's the problem with PLD is he goes on these stretches where he'll become invisible. And I'm not going to lie, before this season, I was still a believer that, okay, I think he could figure it out. If he gets what he wants, fresh start, he's happier. We've seen him have flashes where he can be a dominant player. I was like, okay, maybe he'll figure it out. I was holding out hope, but just a massive flop, a massive disappointment.
Yeah, he
so
had back-to-back 60-point seasons, and going into LA, like they have that offensive insulation, even though it always seems like they're kind of playing clamp down defensive hockey. So yeah, that's going to be a tough contract. I mean, it already is this year, and maybe when Kopitar is out of the picture, he kind of gets elevated, but they're pretty loaded down the middle too with Deneau and Byfield. I know he's kind of shifted around the lineup a bit, but and then you look in Winnipeg, like Velarde, Iafallo, and Kupari, especially they're ripping it up. Velarde's been amazing on that top line. So.
They're a reason why the Jets are where they are right now in the standings. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one. The PLD thing is never going to get old because it's the contract, right? No matter where you go, that contract's going to go with you. And then your reputation there, if you're not a star player, you mentioned the 60-point seasons, but LA is probably expecting him to be an 80, 90-point guy, right? Year in and year out.
They also need him once Kopitar inevitably starts to slow down.
Yeah.
They need somebody to step up. And that's one of the underrated sort of factors of, yes, LA's come back up out of their quick little rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. But they're still at the top of the lineup being heavily carried by the old guard from the 2010s, right? Kopitar is still their top line center. Drew Doughty is still
eats minutes. Yeah.
Averages like 26 minutes a night. He's still their number one defenseman. So at some point, and I know on the back end, they're in a pretty good situation where they've got Brent Clark coming, and you expect him to one day take over as the top pair sort of fixture and anchor. But they've had a lot of draft picks. They sold off a lot when you think of what they were doing when they sold off Alec Martinez back in 2020, Jake Muzzin, but they haven't had that sort of next wave of actual stars come through. And that's going to be the biggest challenge for them is as Kopitar and Doughty slow down in future years, do you have that next wave coming?
Do you think they'll regret trading Brock Faber for Fiala? I mean, Fiala's been
solid.
But man, Faber, like you look what he's doing with Minnesota this year. Like there's talk he should be in the Calder against Connor Bedard. So
you also have to wonder.
But they were loaded. Like they have Jordan Spence too, right? And Doughty's still there, and Matt Roy. So it was an embarrassment of riches at the most premium position in the league.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is if you're Brock Faber and you're an NCAA draft pick, those guys have more leverage in terms of when they want to sign. And if you're Brock Faber and you look at that right side, and don't even forget that last year they had Sean Dursey there as well. That right side is absolutely loaded. You're probably thinking, how am I going to play NHL minutes? How am I going to get an opportunity? So not that I know this, but I wonder if part of the logic of dealing Faber in that Fiala deal was, can we even sign this guy? Is he going to want to play here?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing. And Fiala, I think he wanted to get out of Minnesota, and he ended up going to LA and signing an extension there. Back to the game tonight. Elias Pettersson, Harm, is looking to become the 5th player in Canucks history to record 3 straight 30-goal seasons at 25 or younger. You know where I'm going with my Betway bet of the day.
Let's go.
You 100% know exactly where I'm going. It's time for our Betway bet of the day, brought to you by Betway. Canucks to win on the money line, and Elias Pettersson. Yes, his name has been all over social media platforms and all over NHL talk shows in North America. Canucks to win on the money line, Elias Pettersson to score a point, that's plus 125. You must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. It's quite funny when players' names are brought up in trade rumors or contract negotiations or things like that. Remember Connor Garland before the season started, and then he went and had his little bit of a tear? You got to think Elias Pettersson's going to come to play tonight. I think he likes playing against the LA Kings at home Thursday night before they go on the road. Then his name's been out there. He knows exactly what's going on. I think he has a big night.
It'd be awesome for the narrative as well if he has a big night, and soon we're able to, in this market, celebrate hopefully a long-term extension. That there would be nothing better than that leading up to the deadline and into the stretch drive.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting. When you look at tonight, I mean, there's been so many players that for the Vancouver Canucks that need to have more. Who are you looking for to have a big night tonight?
I've given up on Ilya Mikheyev.
I was about to say that. So
I give up. When he scores, he'll score. Maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, maybe it's never.
Yeah.
I've given up because here's the thing too. He'll get his quality chance. He'll get his one high danger where somebody sets him up either for a breakaway or in the slot in the Pittsburgh game. And you just know the puck is headed straight for the goalie's crest.
Yeah.
It seems like it's his favorite spot to shoot. And you feel bad for the guy, right? Because sometimes it's even worse when you get those chances and then it kills your confidence that, okay, man, even when I'm getting the absolute perfect grade A chances that I can't even bury those, that's got to start weighing on your confidence. So outside of him, I'd look to just that third line as a whole. I think they were really disappointing in the Pittsburgh game. I want to see more out of Elias Lindholm. Connor Garland has been pretty consistent this year, but since Joshua's has gone down, I think the work ethic has still been there. He still has usually disruptive self, but he hasn't, I think, been creating the same level of offense. So I'd like to see a little bit more out of him as well. So I look at that third line just as a whole as hopefully they can give the Canucks a bit of a spark and that it's not all on the top six to deliver offense.
Yeah, hopefully they don't get killed again on the fantasy stats when you look at it, because they were not very good against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Grady, anyone you're keeping an eye on tonight?
Yeah, I was going to go with Lindholm. I think we're getting kind of over that grace period now of where he's on a new team, new systems, new line mates. Well, he has new line mates now, but not even at even strength too, like on the power play. And I know they've shifted up those power play units, but we got a little bit of breaking news here from Elliot Freeman, and it's not a major update, but he says, according to multiple sources, the Vancouver Canucks and Carolina Hurricanes had discussions about Elias Pettersson that advanced to a stage where both the Canucks and the player needed to make a serious decision about where their relationship was headed. So interesting that that's now coming out. Freege also followed that up, said the Canucks ultimately decided in favor of another attempt at extending Pettersson, and he, facing the possibility Vancouver could move him, allowed agents Pat Brisson and JP Barry to resume negotiations. And no extension is complete at this time, but there's certainly momentum in that direction, as Daily Faceoff's Frank Seravalli reported. Should it be completed, it will allow the Canucks a very clear picture of where their future cap situation is heading into next week's trade deadline.
Yep. Well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me when Elliot said on Saturday that teams were calling. It's no secret the Carolina Hurricanes were a team that was definitely interested in the services of Elias Pettersson. Whether there was an actual offer made or what have you, that obviously remains to be seen, and we'll not really know what's going to happen there. But they did their due diligence. Tom Dundon's a guy that, and if they were willing to pay, if it even got there, they were willing to pay Elias Pettersson. That's an interesting one. But maybe that's one of the reasons, or another reason why the Canucks decided to start talking to Elias Pettersson again about, like what Elliot just said, where the relationship was headed.
Yeah, and from Carolina's perspective, they've been searching for that next level star beyond just Sebastian Aho and on the back end, Jacob Slavin to really move the needle, the type of guy that can put up 100 points a year. So it's no surprise that they would be sniffing around, seeing if there's an opportunity. And from Vancouver's perspective, you're obviously never going to win an Elias Pettersson trade with the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean,
No.
I can imagine, for instance, I don't even know if they had
Kotkaniemi, let's start with there. Nichas.
Well, I mean,
Necas,
Necas would
yeah.
have probably
Yeah.
been like, he's a pending RFA. He put up 71 points last year, 42 points in 54 games this year. He was drafted as a center, but has primarily played wing. But because he's primarily played wing, that still wouldn't have been that attractive. So it makes sense that when teams are sniffing around, that the Canucks feel, I mean, all along they would have felt strong motivation that, hey, we want to get this done to create some clarity and certainty around not only the cap situation, but just the franchise as a whole down the stretch, and obviously impacting beyond the season as well.
It's hard to win those trades when you're trading the best player, in the whole package. Would a Brett Pesce had to been there, Jack Drury. Yeah, those are nice pieces, but nobody has the potential that Elias Pettersson has.
No, and that's exactly why we're going to go back to end the show the way we started. The Canucks and Elias Pettersson are in contract negotiations. We'll definitely see where it goes. By this time tomorrow, Harm, we could be talking about an extension for Elias Pettersson, so we'll see. But it's the Canucks and the Kings tonight from Rogers Arena, and this was Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads, brought to you by the Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X's fresh look is just an added bonus to its range, since you can drive up to 406 kilometers on a single charge. That's enough to get you from Kitsilano to Whistler or Kamloops to Kelowna and back, and still be home in time for the game. Now that's what we'd call electric. The best part, by choosing electric, you can get up to $11,000 in rebates and incentives. The BZ4X are in stock and selling quickly, so make sure to visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer to get your hands on one. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.